So as you know, and as you just heard in the song, our theme this month is Dare to Dream. And today's topic is deep in every heart and mind. So the song you heard, as we were talking about before the service started, Dare to Dream, was written and recorded by Suze Ogden. And what we are going to be addressing today is the stuff, but not the material stuff, which is the effect of our thinking. Instead, we're going to address the mindfulness stuff, the spiritual stuff, the stuff of life that is deep within each of us to be expressed. Those of you, my Troward students, those of you taking the creative process in the individual, know that stuff I'm talking about as the manifestation of spirit. Look at there. It's popping up now in just common, ordinary conversation. The manifestation of spirit. Incidentally, the other stuff, the material stuff, is too part of manifestation of spirit. But it's the effect, the result of our understanding of the manifestation of spirit by means of us. So, Dr. Josiah Royce, an American philosopher and metaphysician, encourages us to have courage, for God works in us to embody in outer acts what is for God the truth of eternity. Dr. Royce lived from 1855 until 1916, which was that glorious era of the coming of age in metaphysics in the United States. He was born and raised in the Bay Area of California and graduated from UC Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley. And after studying abroad for several years, he obtained his PhD in philosophy at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, and then taught philosophy at Harvard University for 30 years. So he's a new name to us, perhaps, but not to the metaphysical world we live in. In fact, Holmes quotes him in Holmes' book, A New Design for Living, which I shared with you last week, in the chapter on great possibilities. And one of the things Holmes stresses in that chapter is the law of correspondence. Now, the Troward students are currently making a list of all the spiritual laws that Judge Troward mentions in his books and passed on to us in his essays, because there's a lot of them. Some of those also appear in the Holmes Science of Mind text. Guess where Holmes got them? So one of those universal laws, which is extremely important to our spiritual development, is that of the law of correspondence, which came from Troward, who in turn got it from Carl Jung. Here are Jung's words related to that law. As above, so below. As below, so above. As within, so without. As without, so within. And Troward described that as a word we haven't heard before in our metaphysical studies. He called it polarity. So you see, deep in every heart and mind, the Creator is all. This is also in the collective consciousness, as well as in our individual conscious or subconscious, in case we haven't tapped it yet. So as Holmes has identified it as a new design for living, and for some it would be that, at core, it really is an ongoing design for living, deep in every heart and mind. All things, Holmes says, are possible to the universal power greater than we are. That power can do anything for us that we permit it to do through us. In other words, the outer manifestation corresponding to the inner thought is the relationship between the effect and the cause. You heard mention of effect and cause in Standing in the Light this morning. So we know that we see, feel, hear, or touch the effect, which is the outward expression, the manifestation, the result of something behind it, which is the cause. And when we begin to go into our thought processes, review that, and open up to that, when we discover the cause, then that effect that we were previously paying attention to is dissipated in the nothingness as a result of the clarity of thought. So I love Holmes' description of what I call use it or lose it. He says that as we start using the idea of cause and effect, and we start experimenting with the relationship of thought and experience, it doesn't take very long before we establish for ourselves the validity of what may have been called a theory. And once we recognize the validity of the theory, we no longer are interested in proving it. Rather, we simply accept it, and we use it to the current scope of our ability. Doesn't matter whether the proof is a big proof or a little proof. You see, the process is the same. Parking spaces, princes, palaces. And it's a waste of time theorizing how this can become that. At some point, we must, like the student of physical science, at some point we must take our noses out of the textbook, go into the laboratory, metaphorically speaking, and start experimenting. Start doing affirmations, start doing spiritual mind treatment, start doing meditation, and putting into mind what we expect. And then expect it. And then pay attention when it shows up. In metaphysics, that translates as do your spiritual work. Be clear on your intention. Pay attention. So now, my friends, moving right along, I offer to you that as we move into the 20th and the 21st centuries, we find more scientists, metaphysicians, and philosophers updating these principles, not by changing or invalidating them, but by use of language and examples more readily understood in our cultures. David Hawkins, you'll remember my references to him over the years. David Hawkins, Power of Force, The Eye of the I. When he talks about the evolution of consciousness, he describes the considerable potential of individual mobility and variety of experiences now recognized by scientific study of advanced theoretical physics, nonlinear dynamics, and the nature of nonlinear equations. Big words, more contemporary words, same meanings and conclusions. It's clear, he deduces, that choice is not only possible, but inevitable. That growth and development are irregular and nonlinear. Though this may sound like scientific mumbo-jumbo to some of us, it can be restated like this. Growth, both individual and collective, can take place either slowly or suddenly. It's not limited by restraints, but by tendencies. Innumerable options are open to everyone all the time, but are relatively infrequently chosen. Well, that last statement isn't true in this room. It may be true throughout the planet, but in this room, they are frequently chosen because we understand this. This is just validation of what we already know. And then Hawkins goes on to discuss that some believe the sheer magnitude of such an overall organizing energy field seems beyond our cognizance, our understanding. Yet it's increasingly comprehended by individuals who are reaching energy levels of reason, love, joy, and peace. The descriptive words that he uses go on for pages and pages in that book, Power versus Force. It's really interesting to read them because you'll find so many of them already in your vocabulary and already in your lifestyle. So it's probably worth reading it, if for no other reason than to just sort of make yourself feel good. And the book which followed, The Eye of the I, is a compendium of his own personal experiences in the spiritual process and echoing the words of Ernest Holmes, who said, "All things are possible to the universal power greater than we are. This power can do anything for us that we permit it to do through us." So Dr. Hawkins used himself as an example, not as a test case as much as a realization case, because this was unfolding in him from a very young age. And the reminder, this can be an ongoing design for living deep within the heart and mind of you, of me, of every individual who is willing to practice it. Now, let's take another step into contemporary metaphysics. Many of you are familiar with the name Gregg Braden. He's been described as a pioneer in bridging science and spirituality in current times. This book is called The Spontaneous Healing of Belief. And the tagline is, "Shattering the Paradigm of False Limits." Some of his writing is a bit of a challenge to keep up with, but it's well worth the effort because it offers us the opportunity to open doors which are sometimes not clear to us until we read it the way Gregg puts it. And this provides us ways to comprehend powerful new ways to see this world we currently live in. So his research, not unlike Ernest Holmes at the beginning of the 20th century, was of early texts and ideas from monasteries and temples in the Eastern world, and also of Christian faiths and writings. Gregg shares what he has found and invites us to live beyond the paradigm of false limits. His profession, incidentally, originally was that of a computer geologist, and later a computer science systems engineer and designer. He later became the first technical operations manager for Cisco Systems, where he led the development of the global support team that assures the reliability of the internet, knew more than a bit about the function of computers, computer programs, computer designing, computer hardware, a scientist. His works encourage us to acknowledge the work done in mind by those who have preceded us, just as physical science has built upon previous discoveries in advancing the body of knowledge and the body of connection. So this is someone, as Dr. Hawkins is, who started in something other than a metaphysical journey. Computer science. Dr. Hawkins was a psychiatrist. So you find many, many cases of this where as individuals progress in their scientific discovery, they begin to recognize something deeper within, behind, underneath, and above what they're finding. And as you undoubtedly have already noted, I'm giving you examples of those who are unifying science and metaphysics for a reason. To point out the unity which is being recognized. It's an integral part of an integral universe, a universe that's in harmony, in balance, in order. So to ignore or discount one to the advantage of the other keeps us from the whole. So listen to Greg's words about the spontaneous healing of beliefs. He says, whether we're talking about the universe, the world of our bodies, miracles of life are ultimately the expression of something that begins deep within inside us. They result from our truly astonishing ability to transform quantum energy into the stuff of reality. This transformation happens through the power of our beliefs. Nothing more, nothing less. And it all begins, he says, with the power to free ourselves from the false limits of the past. So for some of us, the ideas coming forward from the past are comfortable for us to embrace and to implement. For others, the more current writers, speakers, spiritual leaders that bring us greater comfort, not just with their words, but with their own demonstrations. Doesn't really matter which method you choose. It's still coming from deep within your heart and your mind. And the more open we are to the greater body of knowledge that's now being made available to us, the more mindful we can be in our own consciousness building. For deep within our hearts and our minds, the Creator beckons us. Dare to dream and discover who you are and who you can be. Dare to dream and do greater things than you've ever done before. Walk in faith. Walk in peace. Walk in love. Walk in the truth of your being. And so it is.